States and Iran as soon as we get them. We move on now, and Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, expressed that European powers failed to defeat Russia in Ukraine, but in their efforts they have inflicted significant economic harm on themselves. In a recent interview, Medvedev highlighted how Europe is undermining its own foundations, especially by attempting to strategically defeat Russia despite not achieving anything. He criticized European leaders for their actions, which he claimed were detrimental of Europe's economic well-being. Furthermore, Medvedev also pointed to public sentiment, citing Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban's statement that 75% of the EU population opposes Ukraine's rapid admission to the EU, but that EU leadership continues to pursue their political ambitions. Let's take a listen into the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council.
А вот Европа меня удивила сильно, потому что Европа собственными действиями подрывает основы своего существования. Это просто поразительно. Европе может не нравиться российская политическая система, руководители России. Это их право. Но, значит, когда они для того, чтобы добиться каких-то личных, по сути, или узких политических целей, разрушают фундамент собственного экономического благополучия для того, чтобы наказать Россию, это поразительно. Ну, мы же знаем, что произошло и с энергетикой, и с поставкой целого ряда иных сырьевых и прочих товаров, сельхозтоваров с Европой. Цены растут, инфляция растет, проблем очень много. И все ради того, чтобы насолить России, а с другой стороны показать некую солидарность с Украиной. Ничего не добились, ситуация только ухудшается, поэтому, по идее, нужно бы прийти в себя, как некоторые страны, по сути, и сделали, которые изначально считали, что вредить себе, не России, а себе нет смысла. Но нет, этот курс продолжается. Вообще у меня такое ощущение, что власть в Европе захватила банда полоумных, которая стоит во главе Европейского Союза.
Andrew Latham joins us once again. Andrew, Medvedev says Europe failed to defeat Russia in Ukraine. Was that Europe's objective, or is he reframing the goal to claim victory?
Very much the latter, reframing the goal to claim victory. Look, the Europeans from the beginning did not envision a rerun of Napoleon invading Russia and taking Moscow. That was never in the cards. They had two objectives, one of which was to prevent the fall of Ukraine, and the other one was to make this so costly to the Russians in terms of blood and treasure that they would never do anything like this again, at least for the foreseeable future. If those were the goals, mission accomplished. Ukraine still is not intact, but still standing. And the costs in blood and treasure to Russia have been astronomical. It's not likely that 5 minutes after this war concludes, Russia will be in a position to launch another one against any of the European Union or European NATO members. It's just inconceivable. So not surprising that Medvedev will try to spin this in Russia's advantage, but it's a complete mischaracterization of Europe's goals and the actual way in which this war has unfolded and the cost that it's imposed. If anybody has lost this war, it's the Ukrainian people, first of all. And secondarily, it's Russia, because despite its grinding advances over the winter, it is not looking like it's going to take all of Ukraine. It is not going to be in a position to threaten the Europeans credibly with an invasion anytime soon. If any state has lost this war, it's Russia. It's not the Europeans.
Andrew, later on this month, we'll reach 4 years of this conflict. Who has actually paid the higher strategic price, Russia or Europe?
Well, it's a lose-lose. Russia has paid an enormous strategic price. Its status as a great power, as a player on the world stage, is greatly diminished. They weren't able to defeat Ukraine, let alone the United States or anybody else. I mean, that speaks volumes. In terms of their loss of diplomatic capital, it has been widespread. They had good relations with most of Europe and were selling lots of oil, for example, to Europe before this war broke out. They're still selling some, but not as much. The relationship is very bad. And although a lot of countries don't really pay too much attention to this war and still do business with Russia, its standing on the world stage is greatly diminished. Ukraine has suffered the brunt of this, rather. It is the one that has suffered the casualties and the destruction of its infrastructure, loss of territory. But the Europeans, have woken up to the fact that this is not the post-Cold War world in which peace and prosperity prevailed and were globalized. That world is over, and they've had to rearm, and that has strengthened their hand diplomatically and strategically on the world stage. And also, when I look at it then in the aggregate, this has enhanced ultimately Europe's geopolitical position in all sorts of ways. It has diminished Russia's, and all at the expense really of Ukrainian people.
And of course, Europe has bared the brunt somewhat in terms of economic struggles. It's faced high energy costs and slower growth. Does that mean sanctions have backfired when it comes to Europe?
Well, sanctions, I think, always have a cost both for the target and for the country or the political unit that's employing the sanctions. That's true of American sanctions. It's American consumers often that pay the price. It's true in Europe. In terms of energy costs, if the Europeans hadn't shut off most of their nuclear reactors before this war broke out, they wouldn't have been so susceptible to Russian pressure around oil. So that was a self-inflicted wound, as it were, before this war began. So yeah, at the end of the day, as I said, I think, well, the sanctions have not worked in that they haven't ended the war. They have partly undermined Russia's ability to prosecute the war, and the cost has been felt, not just in Russia, but around the world and in Europe in particular.
And of course, do you think Russia's economy has truly proven resilient, or is it being artificially sustained by war spending?
Both and. The war spending has made up for a lot of other shortfalls and deficiencies that became obvious once this war broke out. But Russia has been able, and it's unclear how long this will continue, but has been able to sustain its war effort through domestic production and the functioning of its domestic economy, plus its connection to other countries around the world, China, for example, in a roundabout way, India as well, and even the United States. So you put that picture together, both the domestic Russian economy and its connection to the broader global economy, which has been attenuated but not broken, and it has been able to sustain this war effort. Now, there are real issues coming up. There's going to be a manpower shortage. The Russians have suffered terrible casualties, and that's going to have an impact on their ability to staff factories and things like that. There's a need to adapt to the new technologies that are dominating the battlefield, drones and AI tools, etc. But Russia so far has been able to deliver the quality and the quantity necessary not to win this war outright, but certainly not to lose it on the battlefield, and if anything, to continue making incremental gains on the battlefield. So I would have to say at the end of the day, the Russian economy war economy has proven to be resilient and robust.
And Viktor Orban says that 75% of EU citizens oppose fast-tracking Ukraine into the 27-country bloc. Even if enlargement fatigue exists, does that translate into abandoning support for Ukraine entirely from the EU?
I don't think so. I think within Hungary, there's real divisions, and even within Germany, between East and West, for example, there's real divisions on the degree to which Europe ought to be supporting Ukraine. But it's not a 70+ percentage gap in favor of not supporting Ukraine. Where I think he's probably onto something is most Europeans are not interested in rapidly moving Ukraine into membership of either NATO or the European Union. But those are two quite distinct things. Continuing support for the war effort, I think most Europeans outside of Hungary and perhaps parts of Germany are very much in favor, even though there are real costs in terms of money being spent on Ukraine that could be spent on Europe. But there's also very little appetite, I think, until this war is decisively settled, for admitting Ukraine to any of those multilateral institutions, the European Union in particular, but NATO as well.
And do you think Europe here, of course, as we reach into that fourth year, is slowly recalibrating its Ukraine strategy or doubling down here?
I think it doesn't have a lot of options. I think keeping Ukraine successful in terms of being able to blunt the Russian offensives and keeping Ukraine as a sovereign state, even with its diminished territory. And I think everybody recognizes that the Donbass is not going to be returned to Ukraine, nor is Crimea. So everybody's adjusted to that. And then it's a matter of, okay, what else do the Russians want, and should we be resisting their calls for demilitarization of Ukraine, for example, or for the prohibiting security guarantees from either the Europeans or the Americans or NATO. That's still up in the air. So to the extent that there's any recalibration, it is, okay, conceding the territorial losses, what do we need to help Ukraine achieve beyond that, and how do we blunt the Russians in their efforts to get more than that? But that is, I think, recalibration rather than radical change is actually the correct way to frame that, simply recalibrating.
Andrew Latham, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a great pleasure to talk to you on these issues. We now turn over to Central America, and polling stations have opened